Hey everyone, Patrick Brewer here, Zero Emission Vehicle Fleets Advisor for the Clean BC Go Electric Fleets program. Today's guest, well, his name's also Patrick, so that's a good start. It's a company called Modo. You guys may be familiar with it. They're all over BC, and they're looking to electrify just like everyone else. Let's hear what Patrick has to say.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to chat about what getting to net zero means at Moto Cooperative. I'm going to start the presentation today by a little bit of a Modo 101. Not sure if everybody is familiar with Modo, so let me tell you what we're all about. So Modo is a cooperative for car sharing. So effectively, thousands of people have chosen to share hundreds of vehicles, and the cooperative is providing the platform that allows them to do that. It's a software platform where people can reserve use of the car and arrange to pay their fair share of using those vehicles that they effectively co-own. There are approximately 700 vehicles in our fleet. Each vehicle has its own home location, so there's a specific place where it starts and ends its use. Each time, those uses could be for 30 minutes, they could be for 30 days, depending on the need of the member, but pick up and drop off the vehicle at the same place. And those home locations are distributed across 24 municipalities in British Columbia. So we're effectively all over the Lower Mainland, if you're familiar with BC, all over the Lower Mainland, all around the Victoria and the Capital Regional District, in Nanaimo, in Kelowna, in Squamish. Those are the primary locations. What you see here on the map, just by way of illustration, of course, is Vancouver and surrounding municipalities. Every one of those red circles or points represents a home location of a Moto vehicle. If you're familiar with Vancouver, you will recognize density that relates to where people live. So a lot of density of vehicles in the city center. And you'll probably, if you're familiar with the public transit in this area, you'll recognize the SkyTrain lines. So a lot of density of population along those lines, and the vehicles kind of correspondingly branching out from the center into other parts of the Lower Mainland. There are about 23,000 qualified users, so people that are members, either directly as an individual or registered under a business account. We have about 1,000 business accounts, so business will join Moto and then register their employees to use the vehicles on company business during the course of the day. What we try to do with these home locations is have each member, this is in the best world, each member have a choice of 3 vehicles within about 750 meters of where they live. So enough choice that there's a vehicle available when they want one, and not too far away so that they don't have to walk too far. Could be right in front of their house, could be right around the corner, could be 2 or 3 blocks away. But that's kind of the essence of the way we try to locate the vehicles. We have a very significant diversity of vehicles within the fleet. I'll show that in just a moment. The idea is that members choose either not to own a car or not to own a second car and use a Moto car when they need to use a vehicle, and optimize the choice of vehicle to the nature of the trip. So we have sedans and SUVs and passenger vans and pickup trucks and cargo vans, and depending what you need, you can choose the vehicle that accommodates. You don't oversize the vehicle. I think many of us can probably relate. If you own your own vehicle, you kind of have to make an optimization decision when you choose the vehicle at the outset. Sometimes you're driving just by yourself. Sometimes you have 4 or 5 other people in the vehicle with you. So what do you choose as your everyday, all the time vehicle? In the fleet today, we have mostly internal combustion engine cars and trucks. That's historically kind of where we're at. We do have a large number of regular hybrids. I believe it's about 1/3 of the fleet today are regular non-plug-in hybrids. And we're starting to move toward more and more electric vehicles of various types. So we have about 20 battery electric vehicles today, and I'll come back and speak a little bit more about that, mainly Konas and Leafs. We have a few plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and we also enjoy in the fleet 2 hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So those are hydrogen Nexos. So the EV part of that, as everybody on this call will certainly be aware, it doesn't involve plugging anything in, that works in a different way. So Modo, just to elaborate a little bit more on Modo, Modo is I mentioned already, a cooperative. It's a business where the social purpose is very important and a big reason that people are joining. And so we talk a lot about, our purpose and why we exist. And we capture it as said here on the slide, to transform communities by connecting people with places in a way that's affordable, convenient, inclusive, and sustainable. And we look at that both in terms of the micro impacts. So think about that at the individual or the household level. Here, things like affordability and cost to use a car and transportation mobility generally, convenience, even inclusion are really important. And then also at the more macro level, so at the community level, and here, issues of inclusion, again, really important, and reduced environmental impact. So what harm reduction are we allowing for the community generally through the use of cars? The photo is one of the hydrogen vehicles. As I said, we have 2 of those running currently in the fleet. So as explained a moment ago, there is quite a diversity in the fleet, and that's represented here in this graphic, where you see examples of a few different Moto cars, again, distributed around the neighborhoods. If you're out on a date, you can take a nice little sporty 2-seater. If it's a bunch of you going to the trailhead, you can use a passenger van or an SUV. And if you're moving stuff, pickup trucks, cargo vans of various sizes, just to illustrate the kind of fleet dynamics that we're working with inside the cooperative. On our way to a net zero fleet, there are a number of important stakeholders that we cooperate with, and frankly, have also a regulatory role, as I'm sure most will be aware. So at the provincial level in British Columbia, there's Clean BC, and what Clean BC says about sources of emissions and what we should do about it. A lot of focus on buildings, and of course, a big focus on transportation. So in a nutshell, what's important for us in amongst all of that is the statement that by 2040, all new cars sold in BC will be zero emission vehicles. 2040, of course, in that context, seems like quite a long ways away. We have also, at the municipal level, quite a lot of initiatives by different municipalities. City of Vancouver seems to be running a little bit ahead of the pack generally in this regard. We see statements in the recently launched Climate Emergency Action Plan that relate to, again, vehicles and buildings and other sources of emissions. Around vehicles and specifically related to what we do, there's a phrase, all new vehicles purchased in 2030 and beyond, so 10 years sooner, will need to be zero emission, and our light duty passenger fleets, like taxi and car share vehicles, will need to be fully transitioned to zero emission by 2030. So much closer, and causes us to think what we want to do more quickly. In this transition to zero emission fleet, there are a number of opportunities for Moto and for community. There's this, of course, alignment to the community, as just described through these stakeholder relationships at provincial level, at municipal level. It's not only Vancouver, many municipalities are making steps in this direction and talking to us about it, and we're working collaboratively on ways to get there. There's also very strong alignment and building, increasing alignment with our members. Members care about this. It's important. It's part of why they join Moto, to reduce their own environmental impact. In the early days, we were a relatively early adopter of a few older generation Leafs. Range anxiety was an issue, and people tended to be happy that their co-op had electric vehicles, but they didn't tend to use them that much. That's totally changed with the new generation. We acquired 10 Konas right at the start of 2020. We want to experiment more with all forms of zero emission vehicles. That's why we have the fuel cell vehicles, we have plug-in hybrids, we have these battery electrics. want to get them into the fleet and understand how do they work in real life. What behavior changes do they elicit or not amongst members? Are people choosing them more or less? I'm happy to report that the Konas have been really well received. In fact, they're amongst our most popular vehicles. They're a vehicle of choice now in the neighborhood. If you have this triangle I spoke about earlier, the three within 750 meters, where the Leaf would be the last of the three to be chosen, the Kona is the first of the three to be chosen. I will also note here that this initiative to get more involved, more experience, do more experimentation with electric vehicles got put on pause by COVID, frankly. We bought these 10 vehicles right at the start of 2020. We were going to add more over the course of the year. COVID was hard on us. People in the transportation business will relate to that. Public transportation people movement, it just ground to not a complete stop, but reduced pretty considerably for a while there and has come back, but not all the way. We stopped buying cars of any kind, including EVs, and we're just reinitiating that process right now to get this kind of learning from experimenting. And finally, I just note the alignment to the purpose that I mentioned a short time ago. This is really part of why we exist, is to allow people to reduce their environmental impact. You get that naturally just through the fact of car sharing. Car sharing with electric vehicles just takes it to a whole other level. So I did want to also share with you the challenges that we face on this journey. So, and they're pretty considerable still at this stage, and frankly, we haven't resolved many of them yet. In Moto, we keep our vehicles for 6 years on average, plus or minus a little bit depending on wear and tear, but 6 years in total, which means the average age of a car in the fleet is 3 years. If we think about getting to a complete zero emission fleet by 2030, it means by 2024, 2025, we should only be buying zero emission vehicles, so that will be true by the time we get to that stage, which is why we want to start now, frankly, and get the learnings and experiments and figure out how people will actually use cars and what about charging and so on. So begin as soon as possible. The reality today is there are very few. I think everybody on this call or listening will appreciate it. There are very few vehicle choices available today. Happily, it seems like there's a very strong pipeline, so we're really encouraged by that. The member experience so far is pretty unfavorably influenced by the wide variety of charging infrastructure. A lot of providers, a lot of different interfaces, a lot of different ways of doing things. We would look forward to some harmonization of that and what it means for regular people that don't own cars and aren't using them every single day. The next point I'll make here is a challenge for us in particular. I spoke about these home locations. One could imagine pairing a vehicle with a charging station, kind of one-to-one. We don't own the parking places, and there's a certain impermanence to them. So whilst a vehicle might be assigned to a certain parking space for a considerable amount of time, years, it's not forever. And so what happens, to that investment in the charging station? What does ownership mean? Do we need to own in that case? These are kind of challenging capital investment decisions that we have in front of us, not very well resolved so far. A few additional challenges, and I put this under the general category of the total cost of ownership. It's how we look at our business, total cost of ownership over the lifetime, taking into account some residual value at the end of the 6 years. It just doesn't work for us with electric vehicles so far in comparison to internal combustion engine vehicles. There are, of course, federal and provincial purchase incentives available. They don't really work for us. I think they're intended for regular people, individuals. The federal incentive is limited to 10 per year. The provincial incentive has a lifetime limit, which isn't very high at all in comparison to a fleet of 700 vehicles. The federal incentive, it will take us 70 years. If we did 10 a year, obviously that's not going to work. We can make the TCO for a vehicle work with the incentives. We absolutely cannot make it work without the incentives. And I will just give a small illustration here. 10,000 individuals in Canada can access a $5,000 federal incentive each. 10,000 Moto members who share a few hundred cars can only also access 10 in a year as a whole collective. So it just doesn't work. Second, the cost to buy, install, maintain charging infrastructure, it adds about 30% plus or minus to the vehicle cost. That's, if you put that into the TCO calculation, it just completely knocks it off center. Retrofitting existing parking spots, a lot of places where we are today is very expensive. New buildings, of course, are wired for charging, so that's much easier. We're in most buildings, every new building, residential, multi-unit residential building going up around Vancouver, we're integrated into from the start. We're in more than 100 such buildings today, and most new ones. We're still evaluating what vehicle maintenance costs kind of look like in this regard. It's why the buying and having cars out there and experimenting and learning is so important. But it can't possibly reduce operating cost, maintenance and energy costs can't possibly overcome the high capital costs if you consider vehicle without incentive and then you add charging infrastructure on top of that. And finally, the utilization impact. So our business works when people actually use the cars and pay something toward the cost of the car. A variable component, but toward the fixed cost of having the vehicle as well. And we can't predict how the next person is going to use the car. Somebody might use the car this morning for 2 hours, and then somebody will be waiting there to use it in the afternoon and take it away for 3 days off into the interior. And it's hard to know that in advance that the vehicle will have enough charge on it for the next user. And so there's a certain opportunity cost when the vehicle is sitting being charged over the course of the, let's say, the core part of the day, kind of the daylight hours, more or less, when people are using cars more. So quite a number of things, a lot of considerations there, fast charging versus level 2 charging and so on, and how is this going to play out over time. Frankly, the fuel cell vehicles can be filled in a couple of minutes with 400 kilometers of range, which is really great. The plug-in hybrids gives us, of course, the backup of the gasoline-powered engine, but that's not where we want to go at the end of the day. So maybe just in closing, we will find a way to make this work. It is fundamental to why we exist and what we're about and what's important to us. It's just going to take longer and be a little bit harder than we had thought and hoped. And as I said, there's still some of these challenges that remained unresolved, and we look forward to figuring out with time. Thank you so much for your attention today.
Thanks for that, Patrick. Very cool stuff on the total cost of ownership. I thought that pretty insightful and probably very relatable to a lot of other fleets, even though they might have different use cases. To the audience again, if anyone wants to suggest future topics, please let me know. Contact me at fleets@pluginbc.ca. And anyone interested in the Go Electric Fleets program, you know what to do. Get in touch. Happy to help you out with your application. Everyone, have a great day. Cheers.